There's a pattern that has destroyed every major superpower in the last 500 years. It's not defeat in a single war, it's not revolution, it's a self-inflicted economic death spiral. And it unfolds the exact same way every single time. Rome, the empire that defined the ancient world for centuries, collapsed when its currency became worthless. The Spanish Empire, which controlled a torrent of gold and silver unimaginable to those before it, bankrupted itself into oblivion. The British Empire, on which the sun never set, lost its global dominance in a few short decades after its currency failed. The Soviet Union, a nuclear superpower that terrified the West, simply ceased to exist when its economic system imploded. 4 times in modern history, a global power has followed this exact sequence. Military overextension, unsustainable debt, currency destruction, productive collapse, loss of reserve status, and then a shockingly rapid implosion. And every single time, the leaders in charge insisted they were different, that their power was unique, that the old rules of economics and history no longer applied. They were wrong, every single time. And right now, the United States is following that exact same pattern, step by fatal step. The only question is where we are in the sequence. This is the story of how superpowers destroy themselves, not with a bang, but with a balance sheet. How it happened to Rome, Spain, Britain, and the USSR, and why every warning sign says it's happening again. The first stage is always the same: military overextension. An empire's ambition outgrows its ability to pay the bills. For Rome, this meant legions stretched thin across 3 continents, from the misty shores of Britain to the deserts of Mesopotamia, a logistical and financial nightmare that bled the treasury dry. The Spanish Empire tried to maintain control over territories on 4 different continents simultaneously, fighting endless wars in Europe while policing a vast colonial network from the Philippines to the Americas. By the early 20th century, the British Empire found itself defending a quarter of the Earth's land surface, a gargantuan task that 2 world wars would prove utterly unsustainable. The Soviet Union, in its ideological quest for global influence, tried to match the United States everywhere, from the jungles of Vietnam to the mountains of Afghanistan, propping up client states across the globe until the cost became unbearable. Today, the United States maintains an unprecedented global military footprint, with over 750 bases in 80 countries, an apparatus of global power that consumes more in spending than the next 10 countries combined. It's the classic imperial posture, projecting power everywhere, at a cost that becomes more crippling with each passing year. With the bills for imperial defense piling up, empires inevitably turn to the second and most destructive stage: currency destruction. When you can't raise taxes or borrow anymore, you start creating money out of thin air. The Romans perfected this. They began debasing their primary silver coin, the denarius, reducing its silver content to pay more soldiers and bureaucrats. What was nearly 100% pure silver under Emperor Augustus became a 5% silver-plated token by the mid-3rd century. The people weren't fooled. They knew their money was becoming worthless, and commerce seized up. Spain didn't need to clip coins. It had the gold and silver mines of the New World. But by flooding Europe with so much metal, it created massive continent-wide inflation, the price revolution that devalued its own wealth and crippled its domestic economy. The British Empire abandoned the gold standard twice, first during World War I and definitively in 1931, effectively admitting it could no longer back its currency with real assets. This was the beginning of the end for the pound sterling as the world's money. In its final years, the Soviet Union's ruble became practically worthless, a currency nobody wanted, forcing the economy into a primitive state of barter. And the United States? Since 2020 alone, it has printed over $6 trillion, a monetary expansion with no historical precedent, fundamentally debasing the dollar to finance its spending. This leads directly to stage 3, unsustainable debt. Printing money is a temporary fix, but it can't erase the underlying debt, which grows at an exponential rate. Spain, despite its mountains of silver, defaulted on its national debt 4 times in just 40 years between 1557 and 1596, shattering its financial credibility. After fighting 2 world wars, Great Britain's national debt had ballooned to an impossible 270% of its GDP, By 1945, it was effectively bankrupt and entirely dependent on American loans. The Soviet Union, whose communist ideology officially rejected Western-style debt, had secretly run out of real money by the mid-1980s, desperately borrowing from Western banks and selling its gold reserves just to keep the lights on. It was a silent bankruptcy that preceded the state's formal collapse. The United States now sits on a national debt of over $36 trillion, more than 120% of its GDP, and the number is climbing vertically. The cost to simply service this debt, the interest payments alone, is projected to exceed $1 trillion per year, consuming a larger and larger share of the federal budget, crowding out all other spending. This isn't a sustainable path. It's an arithmetic death sentence. When a nation is drowning in debt and its currency is being devalued, it stops producing real things. This is stage 4, productive collapse. A nation's real wealth isn't its money, but its ability to produce goods and services. Imperial Spain, awash in silver, found it easier to import everything it needed from its more productive European rivals. Its own industries withered and died, leaving it a hollowed-out economy with treasure fleets, but no real productive capacity. Post-war Britain, having led the Industrial Revolution, rapidly lost its manufacturing dominance to Germany, Japan, and the United States, becoming a net importer and a shadow of its former industrial self. The Soviet Union possessed some of the most fertile farmland on the planet, yet it couldn't feed its own people, forced to import massive quantities of grain from its arch-rival the United States in a humiliating display of productive failure. Today, the United States runs a chronic trade deficit of nearly $800 billion every year. It consumes far more than it produces, paying for the difference with printed dollars that the world is increasingly hesitant to accept. It has offshored its manufacturing base, trading industrial might for financial services and consumption, the classic late-stage imperial trade-off. The inevitable result of these failures is stage 5, the loss of reserve currency status. For a time, the world will accept an empire's debased currency out of habit and necessity. But eventually, faith breaks. Roman soldiers and foreign merchants began refusing to accept the worthless denarius, demanding payment in gold or goods instead. The Spanish real, once the currency of global trade, lost its credibility as the empire repeatedly defaulted. The most pivotal moment of the 20th century may have been the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, where the British pound sterling was officially supplanted by the US dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, sealing the transfer of global power. Now, we are witnessing the beginning of this stage for the dollar. Its share of global central bank reserves has fallen from over 70% to just 58% in 2 decades. Major powers are actively seeking alternatives. The BRICS nations are developing their own trade and settlement systems. Saudi Arabia, the cornerstone of the petrodollar system for 50 years, is now opening to selling oil in the Chinese yuan. Central banks around the world are dumping dollars and buying physical gold at the fastest rate in recorded history. These are not isolated events. They are symptoms that the global confidence in the dollar is eroding. The final stage is the collapse itself, and the most misunderstood aspect of it is its speed. We imagine empires fading away in a gentle, centuries-long decline. The historical record shows the opposite. The end is not a gradual slope, it's a sudden cliff. Once confidence breaks, the system implodes with shocking velocity. The Soviet Union went from one of the world's 2 nuclear superpowers to being completely dissolved in less than 900 days. One moment it was a global threat. The next, it was a historical footnote. The British Empire, which had ruled the world for 2 centuries, was almost entirely gone within 20 years of the end of World War II. Its power didn't fade, it evaporated. The Spanish Empire entered a period of rapid, irreversible decline after the Dutch Revolt and the loss of its armada, a process that accelerated with each bankruptcy. The pattern is clear. Empires take centuries to build, but they can unravel in a single generation or even a few years once the economic foundation gives way. So where does the United States stand now? It has unambiguously completed the first 5 stages of the cycle. Military overextension is a permanent reality. Currency destruction is official government policy. Unsustainable debt is growing exponentially. Productive capacity has been offshored. And now, stage 6, the erosion of the dollar's reserve status, is visibly forming. We are seeing the world reconfigure itself in real time, preparing for a post-dollar era. This is not a prediction of the future, it is an observation of the past. It is not a matter of ideology, but a matter of arithmetic. The pattern is undefeated. 5 centuries, 5 superpowers, one identical, inescapable sequence of economic self-destruction. The debts are too large, the currency has been debased too much, and the world's confidence is waning. The system's terminal trajectory is now locked in. The only question that remains is not if, but when the final stage arrives. And whether the collapse will be measured in decades, years, or, as history has shown, even faster.